welcome to RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay, a podcast where we talk about sober life, fetish life, and everything in between. Today, my guest is coming all the way from New York, so I'll add him on.
Hey, Ralph, is it working now?
There we go. It's not rejecting me now.
No, it's not. Let's not reject you.
Of course not, but you just had an old version of Instagram. That was what they're causing the issue.
Yeah, I'm terrible. I never update any of my apps.
You'll just have to get the boy to update them for you.
Well, he's on his way back, so I'll punish him for it later.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the live.
Oh, thanks for having me.
As I told you before, I'll start with 4 standard questions, and then we'll just see where we go from there.
Let's go.
Fantastic. Like always, I never remember my 4 standard questions, which I've asked 10,000 times. But what do you prefer? What do you prefer I call you? Name, pronouns, and title.
You can call me Q. You can call me Darkqwolf. My pronouns are he, him, Yeah, yeah, those.
Fantastic.
And what was the other one?
Title.
My title. I don't really have one. I mean, I'm a wolf. I'm a daddy. Just call me any of the above.
Fantastic, fantastic. Tell me just a little bit about yourself.
Ooh, there's so much to know. So I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised, lived here all my life. I have been sober since August of 2003, so I'm coming up on another birthday in a couple months. I have been active in the fetish scene since, seriously, I found it in 2003, actually right after I got sober, and then I've been active in it since 2008 was my first Folsom Street East fair, and then started going to and then working at the Eagle since then.
Fantastic. So, yeah. Okay. You've already kind of answered the question, but I'll ask it anyway. Completely sober, clear-headed, or social drinker?
No, I am completely sober. No substances that alters the mind or body in any way, shape, or form.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And what is clear play to you, and why is it important?
What is clear play to me? I think when I think of clear play, the first thing that comes to mind is being of a clear head and a clear mind. And the reason why that's important is that I know what's going on around me. I know what my intentions are, and I'm able to be safe both for myself and with the people who are with me.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you're a native New Yorker. It's almost rare to find someone who's actually from New York.
We are a rare animal, yeah.
Well, it's the same if you find someone who's born and bred here in London. That's also like finding a unicorn in a way. So growing up in New York, how was that? I've only been to New York once in my life, and I ruined that trip by using, so I didn't see much of it.
I can actually say the same about London. Back when I was my first few trips to London, I was completely off my face, but that's another story. What was it like growing up here? Dangerous. I grew up here in the 70s and 80s when the city was still really, really fucking dangerous. But it's kind of the thing where you don't know it's just what you know, so it doesn't seem different until you go to other places or hear or see other people's perspectives of it. So, but what I will say is that I'm very lucky to have done it because it has made me. New Yorkers that grow up here, especially in that time, we are incredibly tough, incredibly resilient, and also what most people don't realize is incredibly easygoing because we just don't really give a fuck about much, nothing phases us. So. When it comes to easy does it, we've gotten that in spades. At least I know I do.
Well, that's a good way of being, I would say. But that is the impression we get from there's a lot of fuck you, but fuck you, and then you move on kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's the generalized opinion we have of New Yorkers everywhere else.
Exactly.
So you said you were sober from 2003. What brought you to that point where you kind of went, I've had enough. I need to change something?
Honestly, it was not by choice. My story is crazy where, people hit bottom and they find sobriety in some way, shape, or form. I was the kind of alcoholic and addict that I absolutely loved. I loved everything about it. I loved the craziness. I loved the mess. I loved the freedom of abandon. Not only did I not think that there wasn't anything wrong with my life, I loved it. So when I did get sober, it was completely by accident. I was actually totally high on like one of those weekends where you start the weekend on Friday and it just becomes like this weekend long run. And I was in the middle of it, like late Saturday night into Sunday morning, and I was in like someone's house, like off my face, and I had a break. I just stopped and I looked around and I was like, "You got to get out of here. You got to stop, like right now." And I literally took that brief moment of clarity, left totally high, and it took a day and change to come down. And when I did, I said, I have to go to the rooms of AA. And I went like fast. Like I was so scared of like myself. I was supposed to go to a beginners meeting and like in the evening, and something said, you need to go like right now. If you don't go now, you're never going to get sober. And that's really how I know like my addiction is. I just, even to this day, I don't obsess over it and I don't have cravings. But if you were to ask me if I missed it and if there was a way to go back and do it after almost 19 years of a really fantastic life, I would still say yes. And that's just like the craziness of being a true addict and a true alcoholic, that will always be the right answer in my mind, but that's just insanity. And I know that.
It's the same for me. If I had a way to use responsibly, if there is a way of doing that at all, I would be on it right away. And I have to be honest about that to keep myself accountable.
But
Is
see, Rob, that's the crazy thing about me. Like even to this day, I don't want to use responsibly. Like that just blows the mind. I don't want that. I want
you
the
want the
madness.
mess.
Absolutely. Oh my God, yes. So
I definitely remember at the end of my using, I have this very romantic notion of, oh, I'll just stop working, I'll become an escort, and I'll just use that money to become high, and then the mess of it, and it was all very glamorized and fetishized, this kind of glamorizing addict, just like, oh, it won't go wrong, I'll just keep going, and now looking back at it, yeah, it can still echo a little bit with me, that whole romantic notion of it.
right,
But I was definitely turned on by the messiness of it.
right. But I will say this. I learned early in sobriety that you understand and accept what the feelings were around it and
Mm.
not necessarily the facts. And I know for me, the whole thing came down to I wanted the freedom and I wanted the abandon and I wanted, the especially the sexual freedom that came with it. And so what I learned to do in sobriety was find that. And that really kind of led me directly into the fetish world because I was able to find all of that there. And I just
Mm.
learned how to do it without drugs and alcohol.
So you say what was it, you started just after you became sober? You started, you
So
went into the fetish scene, and then from there.
I found it by accident. I'll try and make a long story short, but when I had
Oh,
just,
we have
just
plenty of
had,
time. Keep
we got
keep.
plenty of time. So right after I had 90 days, I took a trip to San Francisco, which was crazy. You know how when we're newcomers, we do crazy shit. I took a trip to San Francisco. It was crazy because that's where I first picked up and my drug use like completely exploded. So you want to talk about like a huge people, place, and thing, like such a trigger. But I went anyway, with good reason, but I went. But I did the smart thing. I found meetings to go to and tried to plug in. I wasn't plugging in and I was sharing about how I wasn't feeling comfortable, I wasn't feeling safe. And this guy came up to me and he said, meet me at this meeting tomorrow. I think you'll like it. Went to the meeting. It was a whole bunch of bears and old school bears. are the best. I mean, bears are all about, old school bears are all about, acceptance, doesn't matter what your size, what you look like, body positivity, having fun. And what ended up happening was I spent the rest of my trip hanging out with these bears. And so I first came into fetish and leather and all of that through the bear community. So that was the start of my journey. When I came back to New York, I found bears here and started going to bear events, and that was like the slow entree. That was like the opening up of my fetish world, and the journey was a long, slow, and beautiful one.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, as you say, mention people, places, and things. When you just passed your 90 days, let's just go where it started. That is a lot of recovery. People would probably not have suggested that.
Not at all. I would never let my sponsees do that. But again, we do things when we're newcomers that are crazy. But if you do things, even with the best intention, if you use the tools that you learn, which, like I said, you go somewhere and you plug in, you can always make it through, and always keeping my prime directive is no matter what, I don't drink and I don't pick up. Like, that's just, it's not an option for me. And the reason why it's not an option for me is, like I said before, it's because in my mind, that's the right answer. So yeah. I know that, so it just has to not be an option.
I think my biggest issue, when I went to New York, I went to New York 5 years ago, and this was at the start of, I was still trying to keep clean and sober and so on, clear-headed, and I was there with friends who were drinking. I got angry because I couldn't drink, and then I just went off for 24 hours in New York. So I saw a lot of apartments and saunas whilst I was there. I didn't see much of New York. I saw the Statue of Liberty from a distance, right, from a very far away distance. So I don't necessarily, yeah, I regret not seeing more of New York. I know it was messy and I wasn't stable enough to really being in that environment. I definitely want to come back to New York and reclaim it, because it was my first trip, and now it's kind of, doesn't feel unsafe if I went now. I feel a lot more secure in my sobriety if I did go now, 5 years on. But at the time, there was just a lot of anger around not being able to do what I normally do.
I had that experience. The one and only time I tried to quit drinking, it lasted a week, and I had that same experience where I went to a bar with friends who were not sober, not smart. But again, I wasn't in program. I just tried to stop drinking. And I had that same feeling, angry, resentful. I was like, why can't I drink? Maybe I don't have a problem, all that. And of course, I went. It lasted, of me being in there, I think maybe a half an hour, and then I was back to the races. And remember thinking, that was the dumbest thing you ever tried to do. Like, that's how much I love drugs and alcohol. And it was the only time I ever tried to stop on my own.
So how have you found engaging with fetish life and being sober? I know I have nothing to compare it with it over here, because the fetish sober scene here is more or less non-existent. Right. So how have you found combining your sober life with your fetish life? Because you found fetish after you became sober.
Well, I started to find fetish actually when I was high. I started to find fetish acts, not the life, not the community, but just like the acts.
It was a part of the using, in a way, yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Which is why when I first got sober, it's like, okay, I definitely want to continue that. I know I can't drink and drug, but we'll find a way. And getting back to doing the acts and all of that, took a little time, as it should. Everything should be a slow build. But to your question, we're actually pretty fortunate here in the States, where the sober fetish community is really strong. Where I first really found it, the combination of the two, was at IML. When I went to, they have, and at most run weekends, IML has them, MAL has them, I think Claw has them as well. But at this point, most event weekends have sober meetings that happen at least once, if not twice a day. So when I first found that, I was like, mind blown, because now here's a room full of, fetishists in gear in a meeting. So you're combining both of these things. And so just having that made it very, very easy to continue to just having the example, having that human connection of seeing people doing either what you've done or what you want to do. It's like all that recovery really is, people that know and relate. So having that really kind of made things easy as far as being able to be a sober fetishist.
It is something I look to the US scene when it comes to sober and kink. It's such a, because at least in the recovery scene now, especially around crystal meth and so on, it's intertwined with sex. So how do
Right.
you approach something that's triggering, but you still want to explore your fetish? It took me 2 years to relearn just to wear leather. And I had fetish before drugs, but because it was so intertwined,
Right.
I had to completely just like almost not touch it because it was such a problem. So I do look at the US scene and get a little bit jealous sometimes because you have such a protective scene, especially when you kind of go, do you know what, I have a problem. Well, then you have at least 5 or 10 people that was like, well, I'll look out for you. We don't
Right.
really have that here in the same way.
Right.
So it's yeah.
I think it's something that has to be built slowly. Like you said, it took you 2 years. I don't think there is anyone that can immediately jump back into it. You have to learn to disconnect it and then rebuild that bridge in a very different way, just because it can't be built in the same way. There's no two ways around it. You have to rethink and rebuild that connection in a completely different way, but it does take time.
Yeah, it took me a long time, and it was almost heartbreaking for me not being able to engage with something that I love so much. But it requires patience, and if you really want it, you can get it back. That's the
You can
main thing.
get it back. And then the next step after that is, doing exactly what, we do. Be very visible about it. People have to see that there that it's being done, that it can be done, what it looks like, what your life looks like, what the things you're doing in the scene look like. You have to be visible with it. I think one of the things that's been so successful for me is that I'm so involved in the scene, and I've been so visible. And then what I get a lot of is people not even realizing that I'm sober. And it's been successful in the sense of it's kind of like that, oh my God, I had no idea. It makes it almost even cooler in a way. Not that I hide it, I don't, it's not what I lead with, but that kind of surprise of, oh shit, by the way, he's sober. Oh, that's really cool, because I would have never guessed. And I know for a lot of people, still wanting to keep their anonymity is important.
Mm.
So being able to do the two things, it's, like I said, that's probably been my greatest success, is people finding out after the fact that, hey, there's this guy who's clearly, he works in nightlife, he's doing all the things, and he's sober. Light bulbs go off. You see the faces light up that this really is possible.
Yeah, it I even sometimes, like, if I had to work in that environment, I would probably find it a little bit difficult. Dipping in and out as a guest is one
Right.
thing, but actually working in the environment, I'm not sure if I could do it. But that's, of course, it's brilliant that you can, and it's also brilliant that you can show people this, like, well, it is possible to be in this environment without it being an issue.
Oh, absolutely. One of the not so best kept secrets, where a lot of people don't realize this. There are a lot of sober people who work in nightlife, like a lot of sober people, and it makes sense because obviously that's from
Mm.
whence we came, and we're going to be drawn back to it in some way, shape, or form. But in every situation where I've worked, there's been at least like 3 to 4 of us who are sober. So, even while working, you have that connection. And the other thing that was great for me is that then people come out, who are just come out to events and you see the people that you know from your rooms or from the sober network, and just being able to look across the room and seeing people, it really, really helps. It really creates safety is the word that I'm looking for. You feel safe in that environment, knowing that there are more than you expected.
I think it's yeah. Of course, there is quite a few sober people who prefer being an anonymous when it comes to that and keeping that private. It took me a while before I was open about it, but I've also found after I've been public about it or being so visible about it, it opens a whole new world as well. And also the interactions I have with people is so important, because I have people who are in addiction or trying to stop or just don't drink at all or have no addiction issues, just choose not to drink. But they approach me because I am visible and I try to promote, not demonize, being sober and clear-headed. And I do think sometimes it is important having visible people in the scene. And this is one of the reasons I started the podcast, to talk to people who either choose not to drink or are social drinkers or are completely sober like yourself. It is so important for the visual, having some visibility.
Absolutely. You know, that saying of attraction, not promotion, you know, that's one of the reasons why I don't quote unquote go up on a soapbox about it, because, you know, the minute I have found the minute you do, that's the first thing that people latch onto, and they think that that's all that there is. But when it becomes just like a thing that just, it's a natural part of you, or people take to that much easier.
It's also, I think it's also, I got to a point where I remember before I did drugs, I was very against it. I was very anti, and I just like, oh, everyone becomes an addict that uses, and Then I started using, and then I became an addict. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy for me. But I know that's not the case for everyone. I know some people can dip in and out. And also, I'm very much a believer also harm reduction. It's so important, especially on the scene. I think it's very important to have medics on scene for parties. If they're going to do it, give them the right tools to not hurt themselves. And then they might down the line realize, you know what, this is not for me anymore. I need to stop. But if we can prevent them from dying first, that's the main thing.
That would be nice.
Yes. So you organize events in New York. Just to mention some of the ones you do: Jockstrap Happy Hour, Rough Sex New York, and Kink and DarkTea. Can you tell me a little bit about those events?
I'm only doing one of them now. I'm still only doing I'm only doing Jockstrap Happy Hour, which, oddly enough, of all of them, that's the one that's actually a fundraiser. It's a monthly fundraiser that we do for local queer charities, smaller ones that can really use the help and the money. We raise at least $1,000 a month, just, you know, for like a few hours. We raise as much money as we can. Really simple, you know, guys come out, they're in their jock straps, you know, they drink, the door money goes all to, they listen to music. It's a social event also. It's earlier in the evening, and the mood is, you know, it's brighter, the music is happier. It's more about like talking and fellowshipping. And we just, like I said, raise a ton of money and then just give it away, all of it to a different charity. Very, very Robin Hood, if you will. But it was, for me, it was a service commitment that started like 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago now. The other big thing that I do is I am the president of Folsom Street East. So, you know, a lot of people still don't know that New York actually has their own Folsom Festival. Been doing it now for 23 years. Just had ours on Sunday. I can't believe that I'm still standing. I'm so exhausted from it. But so right now, those are the two things that I do, and I'm working on hopefully doing some more events in the future. What happened to the rest of them was pandemic hit, nightlife completely shut down, and you know, we've all been coming back from that in different ways, and some things came back and some things didn't. But those two came back in, and thankfully both of them are service positions. Folsom Street East, we're a volunteer or a completely volunteer run organization. So that definitely fits in with my ethos of being of service.
Yeah, the pandemic hit New York quite hard. We saw it from over here. It was
Back.
almost, well, apocalyptic in a way. It was like most of the footage we saw from the States were from New York.
And it was, I can tell you right now, because I live in Midtown. um, Times Square is a hop, skip, and a jump away from me. It was not an over exaggeration. It looked like the zombie apocalypse. No cars on the street, nothing open, things boarded up. And, this really is a city that doesn't sleep. And to see that was depressing, to say the least.
It must have been hard coming back to like trying to get these events up and running again and still keeping the community going. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
what did you, under the pandemic, was there anything going on like events wise, like online? I know we did a lot of online events, stuff like
There
that.
was a, there were a lot of online events, but I specifically did not do any because at the heart of what I do, it's about bringing people together, and I'm
Mm.
definitely of a different generation, and I am what's I'm old guard, quote unquote, to use that hated term. In that fetish was about bringing people together, like
Mm.
physically, and so online, while that was great to I guess to kind of keep people connected, for
Mm.
me, I didn't want to try and recreate my events online because it's not what it's about. The synergy that happens when you are physically in a room with other people of a like mind, it just cannot be recreated online or in a virtual space. So I didn't do any of those. In fact, I was resistant to even go to online meetings for a while. But then I had to like get over that because staying sober.
I
I'll
did
do
some
it.
online meetings, and I found because all of a sudden it was almost a global community. We had a lot of guys from the
Ab-
US come in, and it was quite mind blowing. Especially we had some more sex friendly meetings, because a
those
lot of our meetings here in London are not that sex friendly, and you kind of have to leave it at the door and not talk about it because it's so intertwined with the using. So it was very refreshing for me. I don't do meetings anymore, but if I do go to the States, I want to go to the meetings that has all the fetish men in it, because that 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 would be such an experience for me. And also sometimes I find the attitudes are a little bit different in the States than here, when it comes to recovery, and a little bit more um, whatever works for you. Where here it's more a little bit more rigid. Um,
that is, you're not wrong. It is very. There are a million and one ways to get sober. As long as that's what you're doing, and as long as you're staying safe, then that's all that truly matters.
it's I think that was some of the frustration. Was I very much got a sense constantly just like, well, I'm doing it wrong if I don't do it this way. And now that I've gotten to a point in my recovery where I feel comfortable, I can kind
Hmm.
of like, well, if I need a meeting, they'll be there.
Right.
um and that's okay. And I don't need to, as long as I'm happy and I feel safe in my recovery, that's the main thing. um, I do so much outside the rooms, so I feel like I keep myself accountable. I work on myself constantly, and that's really the main thing, is just to work on yourself, and that can look a lot of different ways.
I think what people forget is that the tools, those are black and white.
Mm.
How you use them, on the other hand,
Yeah.
that's where you in color. That is completely up to you. So it's like you said, meetings are a yes. How many did you go to? If you go to them, that's completely up to you. Completely negotiable. Flexibility is key when it comes to getting and staying sober. You can't, rigidity is just, it's almost the death knell. A lot of people actually relapse because they're afraid of getting it wrong, not doing it right. It's one of the biggest fallacies that I've seen over the years.
So you say you organize Folsom Street Fair. How does that does Folsom Street Fair in New York, do they wait? I think Gay and Sober is also in New York, isn't it?
Yes, they're here.
Do you work with them for the fair as well to kind of have some visibility there, or?
Not in the past that they have. We have reorganized the fair in that, having someone lead the organization who is, I mean, my life in fetish is full time. It's not something that I do, in, I have a full time boy. My, my business is, and a large part of my career is fetish. So this really is my life. So I'm very, very serious about fetish. So when it came to doing, coming back and doing this year's fair, we scaled it back to almost strictly a fetish event where the people who were involved with it, we didn't have a lot of vendors this year. What went on at the fair was strictly fetish. So we actually did not have community groups like sober groups and other ones, because we wanted just an event that was closer in feel to what I went to experience at Folsom in Berlin, where it's just fetish,
Yeah.
it's about that. And so now that's where we are. That's the direction that we're going to continue to go in. Now that's just for the weekend itself. That's not to say that throughout the year other events that we do can't be wider community based, especially since as a philanthropic organization, the money that we raise goes to various queer groups in the area. But for that particular day in that event, it's just about sexuality.
I was about to ask, so what type of Folsom is it? Is it more like San Francisco or more like Berlin? Because they're very, very, I've been to San Francisco, which is much more, I would say, a day out and a lot of flogging and a lot of naked people.
Right,
And it's not as much full-on gear as you
right.
would see in Berlin, where Berlin is just total coverage the whole day. You might even have a costume change at one point or another. People get told off for having sex in the street because we're not really allowed to do that. It's much more fetish,
Right.
and yeah.
It is a combination of both. It's more fetish in its intention. June is hot here, so you can't really wear full gear.
No.
There were guys there who were in full gear. You did see a lot more gear. You saw a lot more rubber. You saw a lot more pups. Um, but we are not as, I don't know if you remember in San Francisco, there's like a lot of like food trucks and it's
Yeah.
very like festival. Yeah, we don't do that. Our identity is, it's New York is famous, especially when we're growing up, for having block parties. So it's just like it's one big street party. Unlike San Francisco and New York, we put up gates, like 6 foot high fencing, like all around, so we can close the area. So it really is an actual space of our own. So that's different from both events as well. And just it being out on the street, all the way down in the village, there's a more of a grittiness to it that's also very New York. So it's a combination of the two. Definitely more fetishy like Berlin, but it's still that outdoor sunshiny feel like San Francisco, but not as common.
It's a nice middle ground, if you could say.
It's a definite middle ground, because we can't have, public nudity and sex are not allowed like San Francisco can have it, but we're
Mm.
not as strict about it as Berlin.
Yeah, well, Berlin had to move around because all of a sudden the Folsom Berlin landed on a school holiday, and all of us is like, oh shit, the families are going to be out. Maybe not this weekend. Might be a bad idea. Also because there's a school down the road, and it's all
Right.
sorts of problems. But in general, the Berliners are quite relaxed when it comes to stuff.
I know, I love it. I love Berlin.
Oh, I need to go back, but I haven't been back since pandemic, really. I just like money over here is, well, almost non-existent. So doing stuff is very limiting at the moment. So you said you're the president of Folsom Street East, which is amazing. How do you find being a person of color on the fetish scene? I think person of color in America's fetish scene is more represented than the European scene, or what's your impression of that?
By far, the fetish scene here is far more diverse in terms of ethnicity, in terms of gender, in terms of sexuality, than it is that I've found over in both London and in both Berlin. Those are the two areas where I've been out as a fetishist. The same racial dynamics that happen, just generally socially, still occur within the fetish scene. Maybe a little bit less because the openness of our sexuality and the bond of being being outsiders eases that somewhat, but it doesn't do it completely. For myself, my own personal experience, this is where, going back to being a New Yorker, where you just don't give a fuck. You do what you have to do, and you show up how you have to, and you don't really care about what's going on. That has really helped me in the sense that while I'm aware of things and I know what the issues are, I do not allow myself to be limited by it. That whole argument of, I'm not the guy that wants a seat at the table. I'm the guy that shows up, and if there isn't a seat at the table, I'm like, all right, well, fuck you. I'll just make my own table and sit at the head of it and invite the people that I want to be at it. So I'm definitely the one of the two, and either one doesn't faze me. So for that, I've had a positive experience. I know that's not easy for everyone to do, but that's what it's been for me, and also important to show. It's why I don't belong to any clubs of any sort. I'm definitely a lone wolf in that. I don't believe in being a joiner, so that people can see that there's a way for you to make your own way, and it's important and it's possible for you to do things your way and show up in the way that you want to, and not be held back by anything. So, if that answers the question.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because, of course, I'm very aware that I'm a cisgender white male talking on a podcast, and we see a lot of those.
Right.
So I try to ask questions about this because it's important to talk about, especially as a European, where fetishing is very white. So it's interesting for me to look at different countries and how they approach stuff, and when it comes to POC matters, and it's such a, well, it should have been a hot topic for a long time, but it became a hot topic during lockdown because of Black Lives Matter and all those things that came up. So it's so important when we talk about it. I think Europe and the fetish scene here, we are trying to come after it now. I think we're getting better. We're also getting better at trans issues, gender representation, body positivity, all those things. We're trying to mix it up instead of having this stereotypically white, six-packed, jockstrapped harness guy, which is nice to look at, but it shouldn't be in every picture.
No, and also that's, for me personally, I don't know, like, representation is important. So for me, like, the images that I use, I only use myself as a model so that people, I'm not replicating the stereotype of what people think, bodies and fetishes should look like. And also just so that anyone coming across my feed who maybe looks like me, either in shape or in skin tone or what have you, or just anyone who is different themselves says, oh, there's someone who's different. I can do this too. That's extremely important to me.
Yeah, for anyone watching, go and look at his Twitter. There's some very nice pictures on there. I have been lurking.
Well, thank you. I definitely appreciate that. I'm also I don't use Photoshop. I'm too old. I actually don't know how to use Photoshop, but that's all. People can, seeing people as they are really allows for other people really allows for someone to say, yes, I can do this. And I know this from my own experience. You know, if I didn't come on the scene and see other guys that didn't look the same, you know, outside of just my own internal compass of, I don't need outside validation. I don't need someone to tell me, yeah, you can do this or not. But it still helps when you can look across the room and say, oh, that one, that one, that one. They don't look, okay, I'm on the right path. You know, I can do this.
Yeah, it's I'm very aware of that. The way I look is very much the leather clone look, kind of from the 80s with the meerkat, a little bit of mustache. So I'm very well represented. So it's I don't have that, but it's definitely when it comes to sober stuff,
Mhm.
it's so nice to when I meet other fetish guys who are sober, then all of a sudden I feel a bit seen, but I don't need to feel seen because I'm represented everywhere. So it's nice to hear from you where you kind of like, yeah, do you know what? I don't necessarily need it, but it is nice to just see someone who either dresses similar or same skin tone, and it's so important.
You know, the other thing that's important, because to your point, you know, we can't help the way that we look. You have a
No.
classic, and that's, you know, that's not going to change. But actually, what is important is that when we're out on the scene, who we also associate with. So, for
Yeah.
example, if I'm only associating with people that look like me, then other people are going to think, well, that's all that he's about. And it's
Mm.
definitely the same for, you know, for cisgendered white guys. When I see like the classic quote unquote look, but then he's hanging out with pups, or he's, you know, talking to, you know, other body shapes and what have you, people see that, and it's actually a super important example to make, because it really, I can't tell you how it opens it up. Again, it also makes things possible for other people who don't look like that. It makes them feel safe.
We definitely have groups of leathermen here where you look at them, then you look at your friends, and it's like, well, you're friends with yourself. You
Exactly.
don't have a variety of people in your
Ex-
life. They're literally a clone of yourself. Where's the challenge? Where's the new knowledge? Where's
exact
the other lived experience you can get from other people who don't necessarily look like you?
exactly.
So I do have to ask,
A- Ask me
what
anything.
uh the teeth,
My fangs?
your fangs.
Yes.
That is terrifying, but also a bit of a turn on.
People love the fangs. I actually, I have top, like, really long, like, wolf fangs, and I didn't put them in because I was like, maybe that might be too much for today. But yes, I'm a wolf. My fangs, I gotta have them in. It is part of my gear. They do come off, but yes, it's the one piece of gear I will almost always have on, no matter what.
What do you like when you have the fangs in and you kind of have this wolf persona? Where did that come from? Is that just where if you kind of feel like some people are naturally pups and some people are naturally dogs and stuff like that? Where
Right.
do you think that comes from?
Again, it started with the bear community when I first started hanging around them. And, you know, I thought that I was a chaser because I don't physically look like a bear. I'm also not, you know, incredibly. I'm hairier now, but I wasn't hairy. And it wasn't until someone said to me, "You're actually a wolf." I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Why?" And they're like, "Your mannerisms. You're definitely sexual and more aggressive as a wolf." I was like, "Oh, okay." And as it didn't quite gel in the beginning, and then as I got older, I also realized the actual qualities and characteristics of an actual wolf. You know, I'm definitely someone who takes care of the pack, who protects and is viciously protective of people in it. Um, I would like to think that then I'm a leader. I care very much about keeping things safe, and just, you know, aggressive when I want to be, nurturing when I want to be, all of those things. And I'm definitely predatory. I'm such a predator. I laugh at myself, and I'm such a fucking hunter. I really am. So,
I have friend. My ex was like that. You can't almost see the fin come up and just dun 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 dun.
oh yeah, the way my boy tells me, he's like, you don't even realize how you're like scanning the room and like just hunting. So it's a lot of the personality traits, all the characteristics of a wolf that I found just are personally within me, not just throughout my daily life, not just on the scene. So that's where the wolf comes in.
Where's the? Of course, when I hear Q, I think Star Trek.
Uh-huh.
Where does Q come from?
It's my mother's nickname for me because
Okay.
my first name starts with Q, and she was the one who called me for years, called me Q. And then when I started working professionally, Q was just was it just kind of stuck. So
Oh,
that's the
I
Q.
love it. It's it's great. It's just like, well, most people on the fetish scene will call me Rocco because that used to be my pop name, but now it's just kind of been, this is what people call me if they know me at a certain extent,
Mm-hmm.
or depending on the situation, they either call me sir or cunt.
Wow.
So we're getting to the end of the episode. Is there any like advice you would give to someone who's either starting out on the scene or starting out on their sober journey you would have wished you would have known in the start of your journey?
I honestly was very lucky with both in that I automatically found people who were, both living the sober life that I wanted to live and, being in the scene in the way in which I wanted to be. And so I found people and I found guidance very, very early. But the advice that I can give, which I think is important, is for both in both arenas, is taking the time to find out what is true to you and not being afraid of that either. And why I say that is, so often we subscribe to what we think we should be doing, how we should be sober, you know, what types of fetishes we should be into, how we should look and gear up. That's not always true for people. So finding what works for you, finding what feels right, and then again, not being afraid to say, well, this is what I like and this is what I'm going to do is extremely important. And then taking the time, really being patient with yourself, not trying to rush into anything, trying to do too much too fast, is building relationships, building your sobriety, building it is important. Taking that time is because that's when it's strong and it lasts.
Yeah, it's so important to find out what works for you and what feels real for you. I think a lot of people, especially when you come onto the fetish scene, you see people in. I'm not. I'm not definitely in the stereotype. I have langlets, but I didn't have langlets for a long, long, long time, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that.
Hmm.
So it's just finding what type of gear you feel comfortable in. You don't have to look like everyone else. You don't have to have the certain brands. There is definitely brand snobs on the scene,
Yep.
um, but it's just important that you feel comfortable in your skin and what your journey is. So I definitely agree with you on that.
Absolutely. And I can give you a quick example. Like for me, I'm a leather man. I love wearing leather. I love how it feels. I love how it looks. The irony is that it's not a turn on. Like seeing a guy in leather does not turn me on. I don't have sex in leather. I don't find it hot. So, and most people would say, well, that's just crazy. Like if you're a leather man, you're supposed to find leather men hot. You're supposed to have sex in leather, but that's not true for me. So that's just a small example of what I mean by finding out what's good for you, being comfortable with it, and then going from there.
Yeah,
It's just do it.
it's interesting. I hadn't really thought of that. That it's a really great point because I get off on leather. Any man in any type of leather, I instantly horny. But of course, leather doesn't always have to be a sexual thing. It's also very much a social thing, and
Mm,
a feel when you have it on.
Exactly.
I've had friends tell me as soon as I put gear on, my body posture changes. My
Absolutely.
mannerism changes.
Absolutely changes. Oh yeah, it's exactly that. Like I love how I feel in leather. It just heightens everything. Me in like skin tight leather, I am I'm at my apex of what I want to be. But when I when I meet someone and when I hook up and we go to cop off, that shit comes off. I can't fucking leather. Not the leather I wear. It's just way too tight.
I've as much as I love my Langlets, it's fucking horrible to have sex in.
It
It's
is.
just too heavy. The trousers, because it's really thick, the leather, you can't really get them off and get your cock off, and you're scared of getting caught in the sip because Langlet sips are fucking dangerous. Yeah, Langlet is not really made for sex. It's made to look good, and you
It's
can walk around looking like a leather couch. Uh,
on
So
the
if anyone's watched this and found some of the stuff you said helpful, or they're really curious or interested in some of your events and so on, where can they get a hold of you?
right here, I post pretty much everything that I do either on Instagram or on Facebook, and all of my handles are the same at Darkqwolf. I was Twitter is more for when I don't necessarily post my events on Twitter, but Twitter's like if you want to see what I'm up to like sexually, because fucking Facebook and Instagram are a problem. Like you can't show any sexual expression anymore.
Yeah,
All of that. If you want to know what type of sexual creature I am, follow me on Twitter. If you want to know what I'm doing, follow me on Facebook or Instagram.
fantastic, fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been absolutely a pleasure to talk to you.
It has been my pleasure as well. I could talk about this like for a million years, because both of those things, both sobriety and fetish equally, have just completely enriched and exploded my life. I wouldn't have the life that I have today without either one of those equally.
And when boy Nick comes home, give him a slap from me.
I will. He actually sent a message. I think his plane just touched down while we were chatting, so I will do that. I will see him very shortly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Absolutely, Ralph. Take care, and hopefully I will be back in London and see you again soon.
Fantastic. That would be great.
All right, man. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
So that was Darkqwolf. It was absolutely a pleasure to have him on. It was interesting to talk about fetish and sober life and New York. So I'll be back next month with another guest. So keep safe, get out in the sun as long as it's there. You have that, and keep it kinky and keep it sober. Bye.